This is a production of Cornell University.
So thank you for that introduction, Vipin. I appreciate it. And it is good to be back. I was here, like I said, a few years ago now as director of the IPM Center, which I hope most of you are familiar with. If you're not, they're over in Rice Hall. I think they're still there. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about ARS. And hopefully this is an informative presentation and try to give you a little bit of a summary of how the agency works, where we're focused, and some of the things that I think might be relevant to pretty much everyone in this room and your research. So it's going to be a very broad picture as far as that. And I will say also that as a disclaimer, in government, we refer to a lot of things using acronyms. So for you that don't know, ARS is the Agricultural Research Service. And so some of the basics that I think are important to know as an agency and some of the things that I think are really relevant. Number one, ARS is the Chief Scientific In-House Research Agency. I think if you're familiar with, say, NIFA, the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, they do research, but it's all externally funded. We are the only agency that actually has scientists doing research, and should maybe be a couple in here. I don't recognize you, sorry, but we do have an ARS lab on campus here at Cornell. We have ARS labs at other campuses as well. So as indicated, it's the Research Education Economics Mission Area. And so the other three agencies are NIFA, the Economic Research Service, ERS, and the National Ag Statistics Service. So probably you're familiar with at least one of those, and ARS is in that same category. We have an annual budget of about $1.7 billion, and this comes through the Farm Bill primarily. So the mission, the mission of ARS is to deliver scientific solutions to national and global agricultural challenges. A mission that I think is relevant to a lot of universities, a lot of institutions, a lot of other organizations. So we fit very well within that kind of a framework. As I said, scientists make up the agency primarily to address a lot of the challenges, a lot of the issues that are occurring across the country. They're federal employees. They work directly under the Department of Agriculture, and they work primarily on U.S. agricultural problems. If they are working in a foreign situation, it probably has a connection to an issue here in the U.S. And as you know, there's an ARS unit right here on the Cornell campus, but ARS is actually in many campuses across the country. We have more than 90 locations in the US plus 5 international laboratories. We have 5 area offices, and area directors oversee those offices across the US in each region. And you can see that it's color-coded with some of the names of the regions. And we have a total of 8,000 employees when fully staffed, and that includes scientists and postdocs. So a pretty large workforce that's addressing a lot of these research questions and challenges that I'll get to here in a minute. But I wanted to show you just a little bit of a structural view so you kind of get this in your mind of how things work organizationally. So we fall under the Secretary of Agriculture. Under Secretary, there are several individuals that work in that position. And then ARS falls right under that as far as the organizational structure, and we have our Office of Administrator. So there's an individual who oversees ARS, and underneath that is these different programs. And primarily we talk about doing the science or conducting the science. And then on this side of the screen, we have how is it supported? And a lot of the things on this side are facilities related. So this is more of the structural, the personnel, logistics, how things are addressed at this kind of higher level. And then as we move out into the field, into the various locations, we see things are split into more manageable kinds of entities. But today what I'm going to talk about is, because I'm a national program leader, I'm going to talk about the Office of National Programs. If you're interested in these other topics, you'll have to stay tuned. Maybe there'll be another talk, or you can go on the internet. It's all there as well. But I'm going to talk about the Office of National Programs, and this really is one of the main organizational structures that drives the science, that provides the context for the science that's done by the scientists out in the field. And our Office of National Programs, the structure again, hopefully some of you are interested in the structure kind of piece, because I'm going to be on it for a while. We have 4 deputy administrators. Oh, and I will say for you students, there won't be a quiz. Maybe there will be. No, okay, no quiz. 4 deputy administrators supervising 16 national programs and 22 national program leaders. Yes, you can count them all. They're all listed on this page. And there's 690 projects. Be thankful I'm not going to go through every project. But what I do want to say is, as a national program leader, and if any of you ever aspire to be a national program leader, this is what I do and many of my colleagues do. We work with literally everyone. Not every day, not all the time, but we work with so many people. We coordinate, communicate, we draft initiatives, we address issues and concerns. These things that are in red are really how we reach out to these different relationships, whether it's headquarters and so internally, so headquarters related to White House, department, interagency. These are our questions. These are our subject matter that's requested of us from upper leadership. So when you hear Secretary Vilsack give a speech or come and talk to, say, the administrators at Cornell, that information is not, for the most part, coming out of his own resources. He's asked us in a very simple way to provide him talking points, so when he comes, he knows what the issues are and he can speak in an intelligent way. When we talk about how this works in the field, so moving out of headquarters out into the field, national program leaders connect by working on projects, project evaluation with area directors, center directors, research leaders. Actually, I work a lot with scientists on the projects that I oversee. And even down into some of these more support roles. So we really span across the agency, whether it's administratively or going into the field. And it's a constant kind of information barrage, if you will, and trying to figure out where information needs to go and how information needs to be shared. But back to our diagram on the national programs. So these are split out into 4 areas, and the first one is crop production and protection. So I'm listed here along with my colleagues. We've got folks working on insects. We've got folks working on plant diseases, specialty crops. The germplasm is actually overseen by ARS. We have our other program in natural resource and sustainable ag systems. If you think about anything that has to do with soil, water relationships, sustainable agriculture, water availability. I'm sure some of you have heard of the long-term ag research, the LTAR sites. So those are managed or overseen by Tafari, who's a program leader in this group. We also have a program in nutrition and food safety and quality, where we're talking about human nutrition, food safety, any type of production or a quality measure. And we also have a category of biorefining. So any kind of bio industry where there's these new products that are developed, that fits into that category as well. And then finally, animal production and protection. And this spans anything from livestock to aquaculture, to veterinary medicine, food animal production. It's a very expansive program as well. So you kind of can get an idea why there are 690 projects and up to 2,000 scientists. We have a very vast number of areas that we cover. But how does this work exactly? So I want to talk just a little bit about our process for how we come up with the science that needs to be done, and how the cycle occurs as far as what scientists work on in a 5-year or continuous basis. And so the strategic planning and national program cycle has 5 components. And basically, this is a continuous consideration. So there's this program planning, priority setting. We move to a peer review. We move to project implementation, program coordination, and assessment. So if you think about it as, say, I guess maybe something similar would be like a proposal that you are developing to fund research. Okay, so you would figure out what is needed to be done, prioritizing. You then prepare it, you submit it, it's reviewed. Similar in ARS, we have our own internal review system. Once that's approved, similar to, say, you got funding, so then implementation starts. You actually are doing the research. Program coordination, that's then back at the administrative level. We coordinate the research at our end. So maybe your program officer that you're working with on your grant is probably coordinating your research into other research within that program. And then there's an assessment. So how well did you meet the deliverables? How well did you address the objectives? We have the same thing for our scientists. They're rated on how well they met the objectives in their program. Okay, so this is a 5-component, and this continues for each 5-year period. So, and what we come up with are these action plans, these 5-year action plans. And here's an example of one that we just came out of in the National Program 304, which is the one that I'm in. And so these are developed with for each national program, and they're obviously aligned with ARS and USDA goals. Stakeholder input. So this is very, very important for ARS, and our scientists work with stakeholders, but there is also an opportunity for them to advocate and bring the issues or concerns that they have to our attention during what we call these stakeholder workshops. And we just went through one for NP 304, which was held in Beltsville. We listen, we take notes, they comment on everything that's of concern to them, and then we work that into the next action plan for the next 5-year cycle. So it covers a 5-year period. And then annual reports document progress towards research goals and performance. So this is typically what you would normally submit. And so those annual reports, I see those, and I actually use that information again to help, say, Secretary Vilsack, Shavonda Jacobs-Young, any of our political appointees that are going out and meeting or talking to folks. Again, that information then gets sent up to them. So in this case, our ARS scientists in here, your information doesn't go and sit on a shelf somewhere. It actually gets used, which I know sometimes that's always a concern. But we try to utilize everything that we get as a way to share information. So I want to give you a little example of some of the research that's occurred at ARS, and maybe some of you already know this, but over the past 70 years, we've done a lot of work as far as crop cultivars, developing superior breeds for food animals, including aquaculture. Looking at the genetic base of U.S. crops and livestock. So as I said, we have we oversee the germplasm for a lot of the crops in the U.S. There's some work on looking at some of these processes where looking at converting food into new cell building material, some of the kind of more specific advances. And then we have had some things such as the soybean resistance to root knot nematodes and other foliar feeding insects. Some other examples, the universal soil loss equation was worked on by ARS. this fire-resistant textiles. I don't know if any of you are wearing some of those clothes right now. Probably not, because I don't think there's a threat of fire. But if you're a firefighter or perhaps something along those lines, that was developed at ARS. And I need to say a disclaimer, and my ARS scientist. So we don't work by ourselves. When I say ARS, it's very much collaborative. So as our presence is here on campus, that is an indication of our collaborative work. So all of these advances occurred because there was a collaboration with university partners and even probably an industry partner. So this is not to exclude the others that are involved, but ARS had a hand in this. So back to the advances. So we've been developed this pest repellent for mosquitoes, and then also addressing some cancer issues as well. So just a highlight of some of the many types of research that have occurred over the past 70 years. But I want to get to talk a little bit about where we're going, because the past is great. It's important to build on, but we also want to look forward and say, okay, what are the things that we're focusing on for the future? Obviously, first of the goal, and this is a USDA-wide goal. This is not just ARS. This is across the agency. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with this, but combating climate change to support working lands, natural resources, and communities. The second goal is ensure Americans' agricultural systems are equitable, resilient, and prosperous, and foster an equitable and a competitive marketplace for all agricultural producers. And finally, provide all Americans safe, nutritious food. So very high level overarching goals. But under these goals, our projects are related to those. And so as you can probably see, I'm just going to put some of the focus areas that are in, again, if you remember, NSFQ is the Nutrition Safety Food Quality Program. So some of the things that they're focusing on is looking at bridging the gap between food production and human health, monitoring food composition, nutrient intake of the nation, a scientific basis for dietary guidance, also the prevention of diet-related chronic diseases, looking at foodborne illnesses. A lot of our food production systems, when there's an outbreak of something that occurs in the grocery store or on a specific commodity, ARS is involved in that. And there's probably a likelihood that some research has been done. And then the bio-based product development and utilization. That's a very kind of a nuanced area where if there's an opportunity to develop something that has this bio aspect, it falls within that program. But again, these are just some of the many that are listed in an action plan. As far as the animal production and protection, again, we're talking about increasing food animal production efficiencies, food animal well-being, looking at food animals and adaptation to diverse production systems. And so as you look at these, you can also see how they fit into those overall goals. You know, that's one where climate change is really having an impact on our food animals. Understanding, improving, effectively using food animal genetic resources. No surprise there. Genetics are a really key aspect of animal agriculture. Improving the efficiency and sustainability of catfish aquaculture. And this is one of, there's probably half a dozen focus areas for aquaculture, which was surprising to me when I first started. I didn't really know that was a really big focus. Maybe some of you are working in that field, but we are really doing a lot of research in aquaculture. And then finally, looking at improved integrated pest management of ticks of veterinary importance. That's a huge issue, especially if you're talking about livestock and their tolerance and ability to survive some of these really nasty pests. So natural resource, sustainable ag systems, some of the focus areas, again, kind of thinking at that natural resource kind of level of effective water management, watershed management to improve agro-ecosystem services, looking at some of the basic and applied research in plant soil scale to improve the utility of crops, and then this idea of improving pasture and grazing management systems and technologies. There's really been a excelling of some kind of interesting technologies in our rangeland natural area systems where some of you might have heard this about the use of virtual fencing. So virtual fencing is livestock are actually, they wear a GPS collar, and it helps to focus where they're grazing. Because one of the challenges is right now, invasive annual grasses in the West are contributing to a lot of the wildfires. And one of the ways to kind of prevent that is to reduce the biomass. And if there's a way to focus livestock in grazing in these areas, that's going to contribute to minimizing that problem. But the challenge is building a fence is not something that can be done on thousands and thousands of acres. So this new technology is really providing an option for land managers, and we're also able to partner with our other federal agencies like BLM, Forest Service, and those agencies as well. And then finally, to develop systems-based approaches, again, for rangeland management. This all falls under the NRSAS program. And then finally, the crop production protection. As I indicated earlier, so crop genetic improvement is really a focus area of CPP. Also looking at the biology, ecology, genetics of plant pathogens and plant-associated microbes, protection of post-harvest commodities, quarantine and methylbromide alternatives. And then we are heavily invested in integrated sustainable crop production systems, bees and pollination. And then I will also say weeds are a very important part of this. And so again, there's a lot of pieces here that fit together that really provide context for these different national programs, whether it's cropping systems, whether it's animals, whether it's natural resources, whether it's food systems. So it's very comprehensive. And I know that I didn't probably cover this to the depth that would really be necessary, but hopefully this kind of gives you a little flavor of what ARS is about, the things that we work on. And with that, I will say thank you. And I know we have time for questions if there are any.
We have plenty of time.
Maybe I answered all your questions and there's nothing to add. Oh, yes, Tim.
Steve, I'm interested, maybe you could say something about the process by which priorities are set for these focal areas and how they're first initiated and then maybe adjusted over the years. Is that through the Farm Bill and the communication you have with legislators who are developing the Farm Bill, or is it with the leadership, the headquarters in White House? How does that process take place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that process is very lengthy and it has obviously predated my tenure at ARS, but it is very much a communication between our administration, and when I say our administration, that's the administrator, the team there, and even on up to the undersecretary and the secretary of agriculture. So based on the feedback that they get from stakeholders, the issues that need to be addressed, that gets formulated into these specific research national program areas. So for a number of years, there were only 3 national programs: crop production protection, animal production protection, and nutrition, food safety, and quality. So natural resource sustainable agriculture is actually one of our newer national programs. There was a recognition that we weren't covering ranged natural areas, and there was a need for more of a systematic view of production systems. So that would have originated in Congress, because all our funding comes through the Farm Bill, and so they allocate funds based on which national program is being decided on where that's funded. So there's discussions between congressional individuals. There's discussions between our upper administration, and then there's that stakeholder piece that also is part of the discussion as well. So those discussions happen primarily when Congress is in putting together the next budget. And lately, we've seen a lot of shifting, and when that happens, we're now under the threat of another continuing resolution. That doesn't help the process. But traditionally, how it goes is stakeholders will come to DC, they will meet with their legislative folks in the spring, and they'll talk about their priorities. Congress will consider those. There'll be a discussion between our administration and congressional folks. And then they come up with what we see in the Farm Bill, which is a very lengthy document that allocates funding for these very specific areas within national programs. But at the same time, these national programs can be nuanced to address like emerging issues. So one of the issues that I'm very familiar with is the Endangered Species Act and the application of the utilization of pesticides. So that's a huge concern to growers and how that's actually going to happen. And so some of that research that's needed actually will get put into our action plan for this next coming 5-year cycle. And so we can address some of those things in a very immediate way, instead of waiting for the next 5 years to address it. And I will also say that our ARS scientists have some flexibility at their location, right? If there's a stakeholder group that has a concern about a certain issue and it falls within their program area, there is allowance for that. And as you all probably know, our scientists also collaborate on research proposals. So while they don't have to, while there is a base funding for them each 5 years, we're not prohibiting them from pursuing external funding to help supplement the research that they're doing on some of these challenges. So it's a very lengthy and very kind of integrated process, and you could probably take an entire course on it to get a really good understanding. But I will emphasize that a lot of it is communication and being aware of the issues that are happening, out in the field and those kinds of things as well. So yeah, it's a definitely something that is top on our priority list. Yes.
Thank you, Ken, for taking the time. Slide. How the technology setting it over to the end user or manufacturer, diagnostic, et cetera, and then it's like problem.
Yeah. So we have, and on that chart I showed, we have our Office of Technology Transfer. So if a scientist comes up with a new invention or maybe it's a process or something that they've developed, it has to get approval. But usually it's a pretty seamless process, because what we try to do is make things open access. And I use that term very loosely because it means different things, but we want things to be accessible. So for example, our germplasm, I say ours, it's actually the country's, because we oversee the germplasm of crops, across the country, but that's open to people or those that want to get access to it. There's a number of approvals that have to happen, but that's made available publicly. As far as say, something that's developed, that process, there's a process for that. But I also will say that our scientists are not prohibited from working with commercial companies. They're not prohibited from working with collaborators that are outside of, say, government. There's just agreements that have to be put in place, and once those are done, we're good with it. In fact, we have a number of scientists that have that are working with companies like Microsoft, or working with Google, or working with some automation type companies, and that's great. We want to see that, because we want to see our science not only developed but utilized. And I would imagine that most of you in this room want to see your science utilized in some way, and we want the same thing. So we try to make sure that happens the best way possible. As far as publishing, I mean, that's another avenue to get information out. And I think most of you would, the same process applies to ARS scientists as does a scientist in academia. There's a little bit of more of approvals that are needed, but for the most part, that's another way that the information is gotten out as well. So hopefully that answered your question. Yep. Yeah.
Steve, we have a lot of grad students and postdocs here. So I guess, my question, given that you have experience in academia as well now as in government, at least the big picture, what should some of these graduate students, postdocs know about kind of opportunities within ARS? What are kind of general strengths, weaknesses, things that kind of you've seen that you'd say, hey, if there's a position, these are the things to think about if they're interested in that kind of federal scientific career?
Yeah, and we have been challenged, I will say, in some positions to get students. So all of you folks in this room that are pursuing a degree and it has any connection to agriculture, ARS is something you should consider. It's not for everyone, it doesn't work, but it is a very good career place. We have a number of scientists that have been with the agency for 20, 30 years doing really great research. So I would say, number one, probably the same thing as your advisor. learn some skills, learn some techniques that you can, base your career on. And then as far as our agency, we have opportunities that come up all the time. We have postdoc opportunities within ARS. And one of the nice things about ARS is that, as I alluded to, you have base funding. It's not a huge amount. I know we have some ARS scientists in here. It's not a huge amount, but it does allow you to do your research. As opposed to in academia, for the most part, you've got to actively seek external funding. I was in academia, I know what that's like, okay? And the other thing is, we work on longer time periods for the most part, 5-year cycles, but that 5-year cycle doesn't mean that at the end of 5 years, you switch into something entirely new. What it typically means is, okay, this is what we found out in this 5 years, let's build on that for the next 5 years. And so it actually allows you to build a program that is fairly comprehensive. And so you're not trying to, go after funding to fit into your program to make it work. Not saying that you can't do that, but there is a nice kind of linear kind of way that it works for scientists within ARS. And you get a lot of the, opportunities within the agency. We have a lot of internal funding opportunities that are specific to ARS scientists. And for the most part, it's a really great career option for a lot of people. They've been very successful. So, and I would encourage you also, I put my email. Oh yeah, email. So reach out to national program leaders at ARS, just like you would do at NIFA. Reach out to us and ask, hey, what is there available? What should I be thinking about? Pick a national program, and any of those individuals that I put on that screen would be more than willing to talk to you about some, things to consider. So yeah, great thing to keep in mind, because I know probably most of you in here are thinking about a career, in some field, and ARS I think is a really good option.
And Steve, I would assume you'd have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident to apply for those positions.
Yeah, except for postdocs. You do not have to be in postdocs. So, and I've always told my academic counterparts, I said, when you're bringing students in that are from another country, get them working on their citizenship, because ARS is a really nice career to have, but that is the hangup. If you're not a citizen, there's nothing I can do. We can't host you. We can't do the things that they can do next. So that's a bit of a challenge. Yes.
The current ARS for everybody. And I guess I'm also curious about how the priority setting plays into like individual research interests and how you have agency. So I'm wondering if maybe you could speak to like coalesce with
So are you referring to how scientists contribute to the work that they're doing?
how like as a research unit for people to pursue and how that plays into the priorities that the ARS has.
Okay, right. So So I'll just, for example, if you're a new scientist hired, um, and hiring is done based on needs. So we might have a scientist that has retired, so there's an open vacancy in, say, say it's a genetics position, working on a specific crop. So as you apply, you're going to already see the priorities, the focus areas are going to be listed in that notice of vacancy. So that right there will tell you what you're going to be working on. That's not going to change once you start the position. What it does allow you to do is, in some ways, those are guidelines. I mean, yes, you need to be focused on those aspects, but say you have a colleague in academia that's working on something that's has a genetic piece that might fit with that, but it's not necessarily specific. You're free to pursue that. You definitely have to meet address the objectives that are there, but there is some freedom in that, and it's not as rigid as, okay, this is missed, so there is a piece there where the scientist is contributing, but I would say that you're not coming into the position blind. You're coming in knowing about what you're going to be doing, and if that's not what you want to do, then you don't apply. And I will also say, and this is not any different from any other position, do your homework before you apply. When you're applying, talk to people. If you're applying here, talk to our ARS folks here and just say, hey, can you tell me more about it? Because that'll help you decide, okay, this is something that I really want to do, and this is some of the leeway that I see is in that. So I don't know if that answered your question specifically, but because ARS, it might seem like there is this kind of a very rigid structure and all that, and that is in place. I would say it's more in place at my level than our scientists. Our scientists get to do amazing, and you saw that list of things that just tip of the iceberg. They get to do some amazing things. They get a lot of kind of leeway that at my level, I don't necessarily have. So, and they can correct me if I'm wrong. I know there's a couple in here, but I think for the most part, it's a really good opportunity to be an ARS scientist. There's my bio, there's my pitch. Yeah.
You said that all of the ARS scientists have base funding.
Mm-hmm.
Where does other funding come from? Like, you actually apply for other funds, or if you want to do more?
Yes. So as your academic counterparts are pursuing external funding, ARS scientists can do the same thing. But it's not as high a need, I will say. As we see inflation occurring, as we see cost of research going up, it's becoming more of a necessity for our ARS scientists. But still, it's not a requirement at this point. But if you're really passionate about something, if you really, I want to pursue this research topic, and I don't have any resources to do it, you're free to pursue funding externally from the agency.
Good question. Can you also elaborate on how the USDA-ARS engage with the stakeholders in academia? You can do through different things like extension, outreach, how ARS is getting involved with stakeholders and getting.
Yeah. So ARS involvement with, say, stakeholder engagement. So as I've alluded to, at the national program level, we have these very kind of formalized structures. But as an ARS scientist, right, there's no extension piece. It's research, and we really want to see the research done. But at the same time, we know that it's important that to get the information out, there needs to be a point of contact with stakeholders. So that's another reason why ARS is located on land grant institutions, is because there's extension programs. And so we encourage them to partner with extension folks to, make connections with stakeholders, work with growers, work with industry. I can think of several individuals that have taken that to the maximum. developing entire programs where there's such a integrated and interreliance on industry or even their academic partners that their program wouldn't exist without them. And that's okay, because as long as you're meeting those objectives and as long as you're advancing the science, you're doing what is needed to get the information out. So I'd say that the options are pretty wide open. If we have folks working with social media, if we have folks working on, say, workshops, outreach events, those are encouraged, but they're not necessarily required, and they're not, that shouldn't be the emphasis of your whole program. So that's why it makes a really good partnership with our academic colleagues. Question?
Scope, what projects that people find USDA, how does that differ from projects in academics? Is it more broad, or is it just for the support purpose?
Yeah, so there's a lot of similarities. And when you say scope, it's probably at the national level. So the things that we're concerned with that I listed, it's not foreign to everyone in this room. I mean, in academia, our universities, our agricultural, natural resource, land grants are focused on a lot of the same things. So that scope, there's a lot of overlap between USDA and, say, Cornell University in their College of Ag and Life Sciences. I think I got that right. So there's a lot of overlaps, and that's one of the reasons why, say, our administration comes and meets with the dean or the president or administration. They're going to voice their concerns, and ARS is going to talk about the things that they're working on, and to make sure there's some overlap. I mean, we're not going to do everything in the same, but there is some overlap, and we're working in parallel. So I think in a lot of ways the scope is very similar, but when you get down into what the scientists are doing, that's when you're going to see more of the diversity. We have scientists working on crops that are doing things differently than folks in the department are working on crops. But that's okay. I mean, that actually strengthens the science overall. So I would say at the 30,000 foot level, the scope is pretty similar. But when you get down into where the science is being done, it's more diversified. Wow, great questions. Thanks for those. That's awesome.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.